Tonight, our special coverage as Israel's war on Palestine enters its 12th day with no sign of ceasefire. Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Muslim News Canada on Muslim Network TV. I'm Zahra Sayed. Today is the 12th day since Israel declared war on Hamas. Israeli airstrikes continue to target residential areas in Palestine, leading to a loss of civilian life. In the latest series of escalating violence by Israeli forces, at least 7 Palestinians have lost their lives in the West Bank. Another Israeli raid struck a residential tower yesterday in Gaza. Out of the 9 individuals that died, 7 were children from the same family. Many people remain trapped under the rubble of buildings targeted by Israel forces. 4 hospitals in Gaza are reported to be out of medical supplies and fuel. The conflict's toll has reached a devastating count. At the time of writing, over 3,785 Palestinians have died since the onset of the war. Experts say Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's recent meeting with the Golani Brigade shows the possibility of a ground incursion in Gaza. Israel's relentless bombardment of civilians is prompting global protests. People are taking to the streets in solidarity with the Palestinian cause, demanding an end to the atrocities. Huge crowds have gathered in Jordan and France, waving the Palestinian flags and chanting slogans. Media reports show arrests of Jewish demonstrators demanding end to Israeli bombardment inside the U.S. Congress building. Cross-border fire exchanges between Israel and Lebanon continue to increase. Israel has stationed new reinforcements to the northern border near Lebanon. On the international front, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has reiterated UK's support for Israel during his recent visit. U.S. President Biden is welcoming Egypt's decision to open the Rafah crossing. The move will allow 20 trucks of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Palestinian mission to the United Nations has strongly criticized what they term Israeli disinformation campaign following the tragic explosion at the Gaza hospital. Israel blames Palestinian militants for the attack. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is calling for an urgent need for a ceasefire in Gaza. And in related news, the head of the Turkish-Palestinian Friendship Hospital in Gaza says the facility is on the verge of closure. The hospital, which treats nearly 9,000 cancer patients, is facing critical shortages of fuel and chemotherapy drugs. The hospital's director says the hospital needs around 5,000 liters of fuel every day to run its generators. The Gaza Strip's electricity supply depends in part on Israeli power lines, which have been disrupted. The remaining electricity is generated by a power plant that relies on fuel imported from Israel. The Turkish-Palestinian Friendship Hospital is powered mainly by a single local generator. The generator is rapidly running out of its reserves. If the fuel runs out, the hospital will be forced to suspend even the most basic services. To make matters worse, the Israeli army has ordered the evacuation of select hospitals. The measure has been criticized by international health advocacy groups. As of now, the expected entry of essential aid from the border crossing at Egypt remains uncertain. The head of the European hospital in the southern Gaza Strip says incoming medical aid is urgently needed so that patients can continue to receive treatment. In a rare move, a U.S. State Department official overseeing arms transfers has resigned over the Biden administration's support for Israel. Josh Paul has cited disagreement with the administration's stance on military aid to Israel. Paul calls the support, quote, an impulsive reaction based on intellectual bankruptcy. Paul's resignation marks an unusual display of dissent within the U.S.'s foreign policies. Paul worked in his role for over 11 years. He says he is concerned about civilian casualties in Gaza due to the robust U.S. military aid to Israel. During his recent visit to Israel, President Biden has reaffirmed his support for the nation. The State Department has not commented on Paul's resignation. The British Labour Party is witnessing a wave of resignations from its members. These members are protesting against the support for Israel's war from party leaders. Amongst these members is Kensington and Chelsea councillor Mona Ahmed. She's criticizing both the Conservatives and her party for their stance on Israel's war. She accuses the leader of the UK Labour Party of being a supporter of war crimes and contributing to the current crisis. Ahmed says expressions of solidarity for Palestinians are being silenced. She says those who condemn Israel's human rights abuses are being labeled as Hamas-supporting gangs. Another 5 Labour MPs have also resigned over their disagreement with the party. Meanwhile, Altaf Patel, a ruling Conservative councillor in Blackburn, has resigned over the government's refusal to condemn the siege of Gaza. The General Secretary of the UK Labour Party has reportedly banned the party's banners at solidarity marches for Palestinians. Labour MPs have been told not to attend protests. A former Labour Party official says the failure to condemn human rights violations in Gaza is downplaying hopes for the next Labour Party victory. A prominent European media company app, Upday, has allegedly enforced a strategy to whitewash news about civilian casualties in Palestine. The media app is owned by Axel Springer, the largest media publishing firm in Europe. According to a U.S. media outlet, The Intercept, the European firm has instructed its staff to give preference to the Israeli narrative and minimize the coverage of Palestinian deaths. The company denies these allegations. It insists that its editorial guidelines are based on journalistic principles. However, Upday employees are speaking of discomfort within the company. Intercept reports that Upday's CEO, Thomas Hirsch, had an Israeli flag next to his avatar on the company's Slack platform. The report says that Upday has cautioned its employees against publishing headlines that might be construed as pro-Palestinian. The company has instructed its staff to present remarks from Israeli politicians in a way that highlights the severity of Hamas's attacks. The company has also directed its staff not to quote Palestinian militant groups in their headlines. The company's stance appears to align with Axel Springer's mission statement. The statement emphasizes support for the Jewish people and the right of Israel to exist. A California State University professor says that the German government has a strong pro-Israel stance and a potential influence on Axel Springer's position. This influence is linked to the German government's actions to equate anti-Zionist critiques with anti-Semitism. Similar instances of media bias have been reported in other news organizations. These include the removal of Muslim news anchors from MSNBC and the suspension of journalists at the BBC over alleged anti-Israel statements on social media. The Guardian has also faced criticism for dismissing a veteran cartoonist over a controversial depiction of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The Islamic Human Rights Commission has approached the United Nations to protect fundamental rights of activists in several European countries. In a statement, the Rights Commission has announced a plan to document perceived rights violations by the governments of the United Kingdom, France, and Germany. UK Home Secretary has called to ban displaying Palestinian flags and chanting pro-Palestinian slogans. France has shut down anti-occupation protests and banned pro-Palestine organizations. The government has also initiated proceedings to dissolve 2 pro-Palestine civil society groups, the Party of the Indigenous of the Republic and the Palestine Will Conquer. Meanwhile, in Germany, authorities have announced the prohibition of the pro-Palestine group Samidun. Several German cities, including Berlin, Frankfurt, Mannheim, and Munich, have not only banned pro-Palestine protests, but also have arrested demonstrators. The Commission's called the approach a cynical attempt by governments to delegitimize the Palestinian cause. It says the approach violates people's rights to free expression. Last week, the Commission joined 9 other civil society organizations in the UK to warn the government about potential legal challenges if it continues to threaten individuals for carrying out the Palestinian flag. Thank you for watching. Our news is produced by Muslim Network TV, which is a not-for-profit organization. We need your support for donations. Please scan the QR code on our broadcast or visit muslimnetwork.tv to donate now, so we can continue to amplify the voices of Muslims in Canada and abroad. Assalamu alaikum.